revolutionaries, and welcome back to hopefully another insightful video. This time we're gonna start the book British Literature, the early 20th century. Okay, early 20th century. This is the book's name, British Literature, early 20th century. Its code name is BEGC 112. And the very first block is Modernism. The very first block, yeah, the name of the block is Modernism, as well as the first unit's name is also Modernism. The second unit is Modernism in poetry, third is Modernism in the novel, and Modernism in drama. So one thing that makes it clear, like in the very start of this block, is that modernism is a kind of concept. Okay, it's not a single topic, it's a topic that's inherent in various fields, because further on we read modernism in the field of poetry, then modernism again is in the field of novel, and it's also in the fields of drama. Okay, or you can say in the category of drama. Field could be a little different, so you better use the word category. So modernism is a rather wide concept, right? So why do they teach us modernism in the first unit when it is going to be covered in the 4 units? Okay, so this is a basic question that must arise in your mind. If it doesn't, then just start reading better. Okay, just start working harder. So first unit has modernism in it because they're going to give you a basic clue, an idea, a brief overview of what modernism is about, and then they're going to teach you modernism specialized categories. Okay, that how does modernism appear in this particular category, and what are its characteristics, and so on. So let's just start our chapter. No, unit 1, no, unit or chapter, both things are same. So let's first read the structure. Okay, now reading the structure in English is important. Previously we didn't do it. It was a mistake because I wanted to save some time, but this time we're going to take it even more slow. Okay, because this is the final year topics, so we're going to take them even more slow and more, in more expansion. Okay, we're going to understand them in more depth. So first is your, okay, first aims and objectives. Introduction. Aims and objectives are not important. Let's start from 1.1. So this will give you a brief idea of what this chapter contains, what it's about, just to keep your interest in the chapter, so that you stay focused that okay, I'm going to learn these things. So when that particular topic comes into the chapter, then you'll slowly remember, yeah, I read about it in the structure, so let's see what this is about. So first is introduction to modernism. Basically, obviously everybody wants to know what modernism is about, and my one humble request to everyone is that do not skip any part. Okay, it's don't skip 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 15 seconds. Don't be in a hurry at all. I mean, if you're reading it near the exams, then just go through the notes. No need to bother going through the video as well. But if you're doing it slowly, if you want to do it the proper way, then do not skip anything. Okay, because I'm trying to create your mood here. I'm trying to settle up your mind. I'm trying to create an atmosphere so that your mind can easily grasp whatever I'm trying to tell you. The moment you skip, then your mind becomes imbalanced. Okay, it won't be able to grasp all the topics, all the things that I'm going to explain to you in that much better sense. So first we need to set the mood. Okay, set the mood, set the mind, bring the mind in such an environment that it is actually interested in that knowledge that you want it to receive. So first is your introduction to modernism. So here we'll know about what modernism is, because right now you have no clue, right? You have no clue about what modernism is. It just gives you a brief sense that modernism, I already know what this word modern means. So it must be related to something new. Okay, so it must be related to some kind of new invention, some new theory, some new technique, something like that, but it must be related to modern world. Then first is your introduction to modernism, then is your what is modernism. So you must be wondering that why isn't 1.2 at the place of 1.1 and 1.1 at the place of 1.2. I mean, first we should know about what is modernism, right? Only then we will proceed to introduction to modernism. But in this sense, introduction to modernism isn't exactly an introduction. They're just trying to give you a brief overview of what modernism is, like in the shortest possible way. They're trying to explain to you what modernism basically is, so that it's just the same theory, so that you become interested in the chapter. Then comes your what is modernism. Okay, what actually is modernism? And obviously you wouldn't understand what is modernism through this single paragraph or through this single topic, right? You wouldn't understand it. That's why modernism stretches back to, 4 chapters, 4 different units. So after the end of 4 units, you will be able to grasp what modernism exactly is. I had to do a lot of research on it, and I've reached halfway there, I think, or maybe more than halfway through the first chapter itself. And so you don't have to do all that research. I've saved up a lot of your time, so you just go through all the 4 chapters. So then comes our the rise of modernism, and then there's another topic here, postmodernism. Now we don't even know what modernism is, and they have added another topic, postmodernism. But it also kind of feels familiar, right? I mean, modernism and then word post. So it is something related to after modernism, because post means after that. Okay, so it seems like they're talking about something that comes after modernism. So what is that something that comes after modernism? You will know about it in the chapter. So be patient, my friend. Characteristics of modernism. Now, characteristics of modernism are very important because you need to identify what is modernism, right? You need to have a particular set of rules or regulations through which you can fit in modernism and then identify, yeah, this qualifies the criteria. So this must be modernism. Then comes your postmodernism, postmodern criticism. Now, theoretically, there should have been, after characteristics of modernism, there should have been something like characteristics of postmodernism, since they're introducing 2 different topics in this single chapter. But never mind, they've introduced postmodern criticism, like criticism regarding postmodern. Like maybe postmodern, like some people didn't like postmodern, whatever postmodern is, some people obviously didn't like it. I mean, there are haters for everyone and everything, right? So postmodernism. Now what the heck is this? First it was modernism, then it was postmodernism, and now we're on postmodernism. The name of the chapter was modernism, and they've already introduced a third concept here, and that too postmodernism in art and literature. Yeah, but this will sum up our topic. This will be all, and then summing up, and then questions and answers. So I'll try to cover this chapter in 2 or maybe 3 videos. We won't cover it in a single video, of course. So aims and objectives. Now again, these are important, aims and objectives. Okay, so first that was a structure, but in actual text, aims and objectives are important. So in this unit, you will learn about what developments in 20th century literature. Whenever the word 20th century comes, it means the number before that. So when they talk about 20th century, it means 1900s. Okay, whenever they talk about 21st century, it means 2000 plus. Okay, 2000, from 2000 to 2099. When they're talking about the 22nd century, it means 2100 to 2199. So whenever they're talking about any century, it means that in actual reality, numerical sense, it's the number before the century, right? I hope you get what I'm trying to say. Like for 20th century, it's 1900s, and I think it's common knowledge, so you must be already aware of that. Then comes your genres of modernism. Okay, so what are the different genres in modernism, whatever modernism is? Up until now, we don't know what modernism is, and you'll probably be confused throughout the chapter as to what modernism is. But bear with it. Let us first go through all the first 4 chapters and then form a conclusion. Then comes the rise of modernism. The characteristics of the 3 forms: modernism, postmodernism, and postmodernism. So when it says of 3 forms, it feels like these 3 are the forms of the same thing, right? So maybe modernism, postmodernism, and postmodernism are basically belonging to the same group or belong to the same thing. So without wasting much time, let's start with our introduction to modernism. During this program of study, you have been introduced to writers belonging to different periods of English literature, right? You have sampled their distinctive styles or genres of writing in keeping with the characteristics of the age they belong to. Like we read about Romanticism in the previous chapter, which was a highly influential period. We also read about Renaissance period, right? Renaissance was also very important, a very influential period. You have read Homer, who wrote in 800 BC. We read Homer's Iliad in the first year, if you remember, nearly 30 centuries back. Okay, so like 3000 years ago. 30 century means 13200, right? You followed it up with the study of English literature from the Elizabethan period. Yeah, we did read about Elizabethan period, and we did read about the Victorian period as well. That came to a close at the turn of the 20th century. So Victoria's era came ended at about the turn of the 20th century, like by the end of 1900s. At the turn Close at the turn of the, sorry, not by the 1900, by the 1800s, like by the 1899, 98, 90s, 1890s, more like. The different genres of writing associated with these different periods have been variously labeled as classicism, romanticism, neoclassicism, and Victorian, which was predominantly realism. So different, like these were the different kinds of periods that were these were the different genres of writing, you can in fact say, that were in between these different kinds of periods. And in fact, these periods in literature came to be known because of these genres. So genre is romanticism, but that particular period in which this genre was very predominant, that particular period came to be known by the name of the genre itself. So that particular period came to be known as romantic period, romanticism period. That romanticism, so sometimes you confuse it, that romanticism was a particular period between this time to this time, but it was not so. Romanticism was not a period. Just a second. So same was the thing with the neoclassicism and Victorian period. Approximately the writing of the first 30 years of the 20th century has come under the rubric of modernism. So the writing of the first 30 years of 20th century, that is from 1900s to 1930, is termed as modernism. Okay. It's not a time period, it's just the writing in this period is known as modernism. Okay, so it was modernist writing, and the literary period, you can say the literary period in that this time span is known as modernism. Literary period, when we specifically no, artistry period, you can more precisely say it, not exactly literary, but artistic period would be a better choice, because modernism was seen in visual and creative arts as well, in dancing, in music as well, in painting too, not just in literature. The literature of the second half, starting at the end of World War II and extending well into the 90s, and generally covered by the term postmodernism, and literature of the last 30 years leading to our present times is referred to as postmodernism or metamodernism. So, literature of the last 30 years of the 20th century, that is from 1970 to until now, it's known as postmodernism or metamodernism. The literary trends we associate with these different isms, okay, like modernism, postmodernism, classicism. Also, that's why they've just used this isms, make the last 100 and odd years distinctive from early literary ages. So this was just a brief introduction. It's not really important, just to get you a brief overview what the chapter is about. Now I've already marked the notes here. The notes are the highlighted part. Although I have a better version of notes that I'll write down and upload. But in the meantime, if you want to just create your own notes, you can just do it from this highlighted part. Starting with the most important question: what is modernism? Okay, until now we don't even know what modernism is, right? Modern as a term relates to the present or recent times as opposed to the remote past. So modern gives you a feel of like something new, something of more present, something more recent. In literature, visual arts, architecture, dance, and music, the style that is known as modernism represented a break. So, modernism, now you can clearly see how many fields modernism was in. It was in literature, it was in visual arts, it was in architecture, it was in dance, it was in music. So it wasn't specifically restricted to literature or restricted to writing. It wasn't restricted to writing. It was also seen in architecture as well, in dance as well, in music too. And what was modernism? Modernism represented a break with the traditional past and a simultaneous search for new forms of expression. So this doesn't exactly answer your question that what is modernism. It just gives you a basic idea of what modernism was about. So modernism was about a break, like cutting off from the previous, from the past, and searching for something new. Searching for something what new? A new form of expression, a new method, a new way through which we could express our feelings or our artistic talents. Modernism in the 20th century, that is in the 1900s, indicates a period of experimentation in all forms of artistic and aesthetic expression. So, what are the aesthetic expressions? Aesthetic expressions are those fields or those categories through which you can express the beauty, or you can convey beauty. Okay, it could be literature, it can be arts, it can be architecture, like all the skillful activities, all the activities that require skill, and something that is more general in particular rather than something specific. So architecture is actually a very broad thing, a very major thing, and it is not restricted to something very particular. Architecture could be related to anything. Same goes with literature, sculpture, and music, dance, and drama. So modernism was indicates modernism shows a period of experimentation. Okay, like they were experimenting with new things in all forms of artistic and aesthetic expression. Like they were experimenting with new things in fields that were artistic and that were aesthetic. To know more precisely about aesthetic, you can just search it up on the internet as to what aesthetic exactly means. If you want, I can search it up for you. Aesthetic means related to or conveying beauty, a philosophical theory as to what is beautiful, okay, or relating to or dealing with the subject of aesthetics. Here the second one, concerning or characterized by an appreciation of beauty or good taste. So here aesthetic would be like, let's see what is a aesthetic expression. Aesthetic is an adjective in here, so it means relating to or conveying beauty. So these fields obviously conveyed beauty, right? Literature could convey beauty, art could convey beauty, architecture could convey beauty. We have so many beautiful architectural sculptures, and we have such beautiful music. Music is very beautiful. I mean, we all enjoy music. We enjoy it for its beauty, right? Beauty doesn't need to be very physical. And then dance and drama, of course. Modernism in literature is notably seen in the writings of the year following World War One. So modernism became more prominent, more noticeable after after the years of World War One. Year like after 1918, or between 1914 to 1918 as well. You can consider it. Though it should be stressed that at the end of the Victorian age marked the beginning of a new style in all forms of art and literature. So by the end of the Victorian age, modernism had already started. Okay, it wasn't just so much prominent, so much noticeable, but it had already started by the end of the Victorian era. And the Victorian age in Okay, so you guys should do this activity as well. You should read about classicism, romanticism, neoclassicism, and realism, what each of them are and what are their characteristics. I won't be explaining all of them in this video, otherwise it will go too long. But you can just give it a quick study. You can just read it by yourself. So the Victorian age in England, especially the second half of the 19th century, that is 1850s. When we're talking about 19th century, we means 1800s. Okay. So Victorian age in England, that means 1850s, saw rapid growth of industrialization and remarkable advances in sciences and the social sciences. So during Victorian era, there was a huge growth, a very fast growth in industries, in science and social science as well. Industrial progress resulted in a huge exodus from the rural areas to the cities, uh, that brought about distinct social changes. So you can say that you can clearly see what industrialization did. Okay, what industrialization did. And the word exodus means a mass departure. Okay, so people in huge quantities started moving from villages, from rural areas to the city area, and this brought about a really big social change. In social sciences such as psychology, Freud's theories, now Freud was on about this time as well. So Freud's theories explained human behavior and introduced psychoanalysis. And if you remember, we read about psychosexual theories by Freud, psychosexual stages of development by Freud in our one of our chapters in general psychology. Freud's theories explained human behavior and introduced psychoanalysis for treatment of mental illness. New philosophical inquiries and political theories needed alternative modes of expression. So now people started, like if I give you a, if you give you a really major idea of this. It's like rural people have a different way of behaving, they have a different way of thinking, and city people, urban people have a very different way of thinking, very different way of behaving, different manners, right? So, and obviously, so rural people would like to read different kind of things, and say different kind of things, and express their express their feelings in a different kind of way. In a similar sense, urban people would like to read different kind of things, say different kind of things, and express them in a different kind of way. So since now most of the, or major part of the population was started to become urban, people started seeking for a different kind of expression that was more suitable to the urban public, right? Okay, so why did this modernism develop? Modernism came about as came about due to a change in the population from rural to urban. Okay, because people's mindset changed, their way of talking, their way of behaving changed, so they needed a new form, a new method, a new way through which they could express their feelings. Earlier most of the population was rural population, so writers wanted to, writers mostly wrote about rural people, rural settings, but now writers had to write about urban people, urban settings. So they had to bring about a new mode of expression, and this new mode of expression was modernism. Modernists felt a growing alienation from Victorian prudery rooted in Victorian morality and in a society based on hierarchical principles of gender and class. It's optimism and conventions. Okay, so from now on starts a rather important part which I'll explain to you in a bit more detail. So, where were we? Yeah, we were at modernists felt a growing alienation. Just hold on a second. Modernists used to news that was expression notably. Yeah, so here we are. Modernist felt a growing alienation. It's 3. Just hold on a second, and here we have 3. Yeah, so the writings of modernism were at their zenith, or you can say at their peak, after the First World War, that is after 1914 to 18, and the modernist writers felt very separated. Growing alienation, being alienated means feeling like we and them are completely different. Okay, we don't know anything about each other, like completely alien to us. So the modernist writers felt very separated or different or alienated from the prudery of Victorian era. Now you don't know what prudery is, right? But I'll explain it. Which was based on the moral and ethical principles adhered to in during the Victorian times, and they felt alienated from Victorian society as well, which was based upon hierarchy, which was according to a person's gender and class. So the modernist writers or the modernist people, they felt very separated, okay, very different from Victorian people, which believed in a different kind of moral rules, different kind of moral principles, and whose society was based on hierarchy. Hierarchy means a kind of order, okay, a kind of, it's more like a rank than a particular a social order or a rank, you can say, where people are, like in an ascending order. Okay, like first there is the lowest category of people, then the higher category of people, higher category of people, so on. Hierarchy is mostly in army or police, like these kind of are forces. So what they're trying to say is that the modern writers, they felt very different from Victorian people and Victorian times, in according to their moral rule, moral principles, and how the Victorian society was based on gender and class, was based on a hierarchy. That hierarchy was based on gender and class, and they also felt very different from the Victorian prudery. And what was Victorian prudery? Victorian prudery is nothing prudery. Let's talk about what prudery is. So prudery means strict adherence to high moral standards and rules regarding a person's behavior. Like in the previous times, people were very polite. They were excessively polite. They were excessively respectful of each other. They were very obedient. So they had high moral standards, they had very high rules regarding how someone should behave. Like at the slightest inconvenience, they would feel disrespectful, or they would feel that the person's behavior is not up to the mark. So prudery means strict adherence, like strictly following very high moral rules and standards of behavior. It often included showing too much decorum and modesty, and getting or showing to get offended and easily shocked at the mention of sexual topics or mentions. So it means like showing too much modesty. Okay, that no, you are so great, I am nothing, please sit down, please, and just like these kind of things, like not being real but being a fake person, like showing too much respect, showing too much decorum, too much manners. Okay, and getting affected, getting offended at the slightest mention of anything sexual, or at least acting to get offended at the mention of anything slightly sexual. This is what prudery was. And Victorian prudery here refers to the prudery that was in Victoria's time. Okay, so the prudery that was practiced in Victoria's time, because every society has a different kinds of moral standards, moral rules, and standards of behavior, right? So we're talking about the prudery that was followed in Victoria's time. Prudery can be summed up as showing excessive propriety or modesty in speech, conduct, etc., and getting or pretending to get easily shocked at any mention of sex or sex related stuff. So, this was prudery. Its optimism and conventions. New ideas in psychology, philosophy, and political theory kindled a search for new modes of expression. Now, this is again the same stuff. I don't know why they keep on repeating it, just to increase the length of the text, or maybe to help you remember it. I don't know, maybe probably to just increase the length of the text. All these caused a radical shift both in form and content in 20th century art and literature. So, all of this created a massive shift. Okay, a great shift. A great shift in what? In the form and content, like what they form and content here means the kind of content that they wrote about, and the form, the manner in which they practiced their artistic qualities, their artistic expressions in the 20th century art and literature. Okay, so it changed very different, it changed very much, it highly changed. Okay, modernism introduced new literature and new forms of art that were innovative and experimental. Now, again, we've read about this already. So, what they're again saying is that modernism introduced new literature. Now, we're particularly talking about literature, and I mean, art is in the next half of this line. But the first half of the line particularly talks about literature. So modernism introduced new literature. Okay, it was a new literature and new forms of art as well that were innovative and experiment. Innovative means that were new, that were very new. Now I'll just explain it. So modernism, new ideas in psychology, philosophy, and political theory kindled. New ideas in psychology, philosophy, and political theory kindled a search for new modes of expression. All these caused a radical shift both in form and content in 20th century art and literature. So let's first explain what this means. New breakthroughs and ideas emerged in the fields of psychology, philosophy, and political theory. These breakthroughs inspired a search for new modes of expression. All of these things caused a radical shift. Okay, you check out the meaning of radical shift. I'm not going to explain it so much. Radical shift basically means a huge shift, and like I could actually explain it, but if I go on about explaining every single word, then we wouldn't be able to get to any point. But still, this might be the last. I might be, maybe not. So radical shift basically means a change that occurs very fast and modifies the very essence, the very basic structure of your society or organizational practices. That is what radical shift means. A change that occurs relatively or very fast and modifies the very essence of something's very structure and organizational structure. Again, structure, I've used it 2 times 10. So all of these things caused a radical shift in the form and content in 20th century's art and literature. Right? Moving on. Modernism introduced new literature and new forms of art that were innovative and experimental. So what does this mean? This means that modernism introduced or brought about new forms of literature and art, those which were different from the previous ones completely. Okay, so innovative basically means something that is new, that is different from the previous thing completely, like something completely new that you've never seen before, never heard of before, never thought of before. Something that is completely new to you is innovative, is innovation. And experimental as well, of course. Let's see how much we've covered. Only half an hour. So modernism introduced new literature. Yeah, we've done this part. It spanned the second half of the 20th century almost for 3 decades. So the second half of the century, almost for 3 decades, and gained ascendancy over modernism from the 1960s. So what could be the second half of the 20th century? First half is the 1950s, of course. Second half is the 19 after the 1950s till the 2000s. So it spanned the second half, means from 1950 to 1980, right? 1980s. However, we have to remember that artistic and literary movements cannot be pinned down to an identifiable calendar year, and we cannot say that modernism started exactly in 1900 at the turn of the millennium and postmodern at the end of World War II in 1945. So here we were talking about postmodern period. Okay, I think I missed it. Yeah, after this I missed it. So the first 3 decades of the 20th century, that is 1900 to 1930, this is called the modern period. And then from the postmodern, I mean, they haven't told us what was until 1930 to 1945, probably the decline of the modern period. But postmodern period starts somewhere around after the end of World War II, that is after 1945. So, and it starts to become very noticeable or very prominent after the 1950s. So 1950s and till 1980s is considered more specific to postmodern period, right? However, like, yeah, later on it says that literary movements are not something like something suddenly started exactly in 1900 and then suddenly ended in 1930. They start slowly over time. Okay, they start developing over time. So we're saying that modern period started during 1900s. Okay, but it is not the case. Modern period must have started around 1850s or even 1840s and slowly developed over time. When we're talking about a specific period, when we're talking on modern period, it means the time spent during which this form of writing or this form of art was most prominent or most noticeable or as at its peak, okay, at its zenith. Same goes for postmodernism period, which was at its peak during 1950s to 1980s. Now, broadly speaking, the 20th century saw the rise of a new movement in creative arts, both visual and performing arts. It had a strong impact on literature, theatre, painting, sculpture, music, dance, and architecture. So, when we talk about it in a more broad sense, 20th century saw the rise of new movement. It was in creative arts, it was in visual arts, and it was in performing arts, are like dance and drama. Your visual arts are like painting, and creative arts are, I think, creative arts could be something to sculpture or maybe literature. I don't know exactly, but it should be like that. Okay, so where were we? Yeah, the 20th century saw the rise, right? It had a strong impact on literature, theatre, painting, etc. So what it means here is that the 20th century saw a rise of a new kind of a movement in the fields of both visual and performing arts. This movement also highly impacted or influenced literature, theatre, and painting. Okay, so it wasn't specifically about literature, theatre, and painting, but highly influenced. Highly means really highly influenced. It's not like everybody started writing in modernism in literature. There were people who wrote about earlier forms of genres or earlier forms of times periods. But most of the period were writing about modernism or were writing in modernism. Now, modernism is actually kind of movement. It cannot be said started writing in or as. It's a movement. Modernism is a movement that refers to a specific type of or a specific characteristic or traits of artistic form of expression. Or it, to sum up modernism, you can say it is a specific kind of. It is a movement. It was a movement that in which writers or in which artists started using a particular set of characteristics to define their art or to use as their form of expression. in their arts, or where artists started using a particular form of expression or a particular kind of technique or form of expression in their artistic fields or artistic skills. Okay, so by now you must know what modernism is about. Modernism isn't exactly a method of writing. It isn't exactly a time period. It is more like a movement. It is more like a way in which people collectively behaved, or people collectively started writing and creating things. Just an artistic movement, which isn't restricted to any particular field of art. Okay, so where were we? Then next we'll cover the rise of modernism and postmodernism. So yeah, in this video we'll cover only up till here. In the next video we'll cover the rise of modernism and postmodernism. We'll try to break it up into even more smaller parts so that you can easily digest them. We haven't finished yet because obviously some text is left now. It was also a philosophical movement as it affected a change in the Western society towards a new way of thinking. So in some sense it was a philosophical movement as well. Because it changed how the Western people thought, how they lived, how they expressed themselves, and how they engaged in cultural and artistic pursuits. Okay, so it obviously had to be a philosophical movement. When people start writing about something particular, so the reader's mind is always influenced by it, right? So let's say that people started writing about racism. Every writer, or almost every writer, is writing about racism. So even so people who read these writers, even if before they didn't know much about racism, or they didn't know how bad racism was, would be highly influenced now, and the writer would obviously add some point either in support of racism or either criticizing racism. So the readers would also be influenced by that. Either they would support racism, or they would criticize racism, if not openly, then within themselves. So it obviously plays a huge role in how people think, how they start living, how they start expressing themselves. And now if you're thinking about racism all the time, if everyone around you is talking about a particular thing, then you would also start talking about it. You will start doing something about it. Either you will start hating the black Americans, the black people, or you would start feeling more sympathetic with them, right? One of the two things is supposed to happen. It's very hard to stay neutral. Now, modernism as a movement gave men and women the means to tackle a new world that was increasingly getting. Now, this is an important line. The reason why I didn't mark it because it couldn't be converted into a note. Okay, but this is significantly important from not from here. Wait, what the heck? From here to here. So means to tackle a new world that was increasingly getting impatient with traditional it's written mores, but I believe it should be morals and beliefs. So modernism, it as a movement, it gave people a means, a method, to how they could tackle this new world, which was increasingly getting more and more patient, like which was getting fed up of the traditional morals and belief. Like there comes a breaking point to something, right? So this was now the breaking point to Victorian prudery was coming about, and people wanted something new in their lives, and modernism was that something new, and hence the name modernism as well. Modernism was that something new which gave people a method to get out of that strict moral standards and beliefs. The term modernism has come to signify a new trend in the early decades of the 20th century, a divergence from the early tradition of arts and literature that brought in various innovative movements and styles as a replacement. So modernism now basically signify a new form, like previously it was more philosophical, now it is more context specific. So nowadays modernism describes something as replacing the earlier forms of art and literature with some new and innovative forms of art and literature. Okay, so that's what our what is modernism was about. Next we will study the rise of modernism and postmodernism, as well as characteristics of modernism too. It is going to be really long, so we'll finish until postmodern criticism in the next video, because my throat's already feeling really itchy and it's paining. So we'll cover these topics in the next video. Till then, goodbye and take care.